cameras and toys.
Well, greetings. Welcome back. As always, thank you all so much for joining us today. More flight cancellations coming after shutdown's worst day for air travel. Over 1,500 flights scheduled for today have been canceled as the toll of the longest ever government shutdown continues to grow for Americans. And this while TSA workers struggling to make ends meet amid government shutdown. Many TSA workers have been on the job without pay as the government shutdown stretches into another pay period, leaving many in the lurch. Well, how complex of a problem is this? How long will it take to get the system back up and running? And are there really any significant safety concerns? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into the current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at a couple of today's headlines. Russia says it's considering Venezuela's request for assistance amid U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Friday that Moscow was prepared to, quote, respond appropriately, end quote, to Venezuela's request for military assistance amid a U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean. The U.S. bombed Somalia for the 90th time this year. According to U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, the airstrike targeted the ISIS affiliate in Somalia's Puntland region. They said in a press release today that forces launched an airstrike in Somalia on the 8th of November, marking the 90th time that the U.S. has bombed the country this year. And finally, the president threatens to dock pay of absent air traffic controllers. He says he would recommend a $10,000 bonus for controllers who remained on job during the government shutdown. Well, on today's episode, the issue before us is air travelers are bracing for disruptions to worsen after thousands of flights were delayed or canceled over the weekend, and as the longest government shutdown in U.S. history has reached its 41st day today. My guest has over 38 years experience in domestic and international Part Section 121 airline operations, with a broad background in the certification process, training and operations program development, compliance auditing, and preparation of NACIP and RECIP inspections. I hope I did that right. Over 17,000 hours and 33 years as a captain of B-747s, A-300s, DC-10s, and B-727s operated under Part Section 121 with over 300 Atlantic and Pacific Ocean crossings, experienced as a manager of flight standards, check airman, director of operations, and chief pilot. He has a vitae that is much longer than this, but let's suffice it to say he spent a lot of time in the cockpit and he knows what he's talking about. Chief Keith Mackey, also founder of Mackey International Aviation Safety Consultants. Captain Mackey, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dr. Leon. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
Really, really appreciate it. So let me start with the simple question. 41 days of shutdown. Now they've canceled 1,500 flights scheduled for today. It's not as simple as canceling and then rescheduling flights. This now is, as I understand it, it's a system that's a puzzle that is now missing significant pieces. Captain Mackey.
Well, that's a very good way of looking at it. You just don't cancel a few flights. They're canceling, in fact, about 2% of the flights every other day. And when you do that, that really messes the system up, because every day the availability of airplanes and pilots and flight attendants to fly them decreases, and the schedules you had the day before is not going to work that day or the following day. So it takes a lot of planning to be able to work around this. In fact, it isn't an efficient way of doing it at all. We have to have the airplane arrive in the proper place at the proper time to make up the flight. And then we have to have pilots and flight attendants at the same place. And that can be complicated also, because sometimes the flight attendants and pilots operate under different rules. So it's a great big balancing act, and it's sorted out on a daily basis. Of course, while we've heard that the strike is effectively settled, it won't be settled until Congress accepts the terms of settlement and the system actually gets back to work. This has been particularly difficult for everybody concerned, because when you think of what the airlines actually transport, in addition to passengers and baggage, there's a lot of restricted material that goes on, chemicals, drugs, medicines, all that sort of thing that's had to be transported by air. And it has to be in the right place to get loaded and in the right place to get off. So it's a real balancing act to get the material through as well. And that's what's causing a lot of the concern. The system was short of air traffic controllers and has been for some time. The FAA is constantly training new controllers, and it's not an easy job. You can't take someone out of the workforce and suddenly make him an air traffic controller. Not everyone has the ability to do it. Some are better than others, and it shows up in the progress. Not everyone makes it through the program. So if we had everything back to normal, we'd still have the problem of not enough controllers. So it's kind of a big balancing act we're dealing with here, Dr. Leon.
So as I understand the progression of this, or depending on your perspective, the deterioration of this, depending on how you want to look at it, the government shuts down. Air traffic controllers then are now working without pay, and some of them start to call in sick. And as a result of this, you start with a depleted number to begin with, as you just articulated. And now you have even fewer showing up of those that were on the job. How, I don't want this to sound dramatic, but how significant of a safety concern was there and is there?
Well, safety concerns are being met by cutting back on the number of flights. So the airlines, by the end of the period, will be cut back 10%, with the possibility of going to 20% if this continues, although it's unlikely to continue now. All we have to do is get Congress to approve it, and we've got the other half of the puzzle put in place. And hopefully we can mend the thing, put things back together again a little bit. Now, TSA is another issue. We have to have inspectors that are trained to properly screen the passengers. The air traffic controllers, as you mentioned, a lot of them are in training, and a lot of the ones that are flying simply can't afford to live for weeks and weeks without any pay. So they're taking other jobs in order to restore their income. I think as a result of this, we may see a big effort to privatize the air traffic control system, so that the employees are not government employees, but are employees like any other corporation. So I think there'll be a push for this. We'll see what happens when the dust settles.
Is that a true solution to the problem? Does that concern you, the privatization of air traffic controllers? And if you were a controller, would you see this as a positive move?
Well, that's a good question. It's double-sided. Some of them would see it as a good move and others would not. The solution would be that it would make them not go on strike because the government was shut down and they could continue to work. There are some countries that have a privatized air traffic control system. Of course, I've never heard of them dealing with a government shutdown the same way,
Mhm.
but it works in some places. And it should be investigated here. I don't know what the solution is. Depends on how it was put together, but it might work or at least partially work. So we could have a system that wouldn't fall apart because of lack of government funding.
Interesting. So again, you just mentioned you have pilots, you have aircraft, you have ground crews, you have flight attendants, a number of moving pieces in this, and a number of them you said don't necessarily work on the same schedule. So that's why I was part of why I was making the point that this is a huge puzzle with missing pieces. I think another element of this is scheduling the flights, because it's not simply a hub to hub issue. It's also a matter of connecting flights and this entire integrated web of connecting flights. I mean, so this is a big bowl of spaghetti.
Absolutely. And one airline has to be able to connect with the other airline's flights because they don't all go to the same places. So consequently, if you have to change in Atlanta to get to wherever you're going, the Atlanta hub may no longer be operational, and you may no longer be able to get another flight to where you want to go out of that hub. So it's going to be difficult to put the pieces back together again, particularly because it changes every day. And the airlines probably don't know what flights they're going to cancel next week. They have some plans. They have to organize the cancellations with the other airlines that do serve some of
Mhm.
these routes so we can get some semblance of order put back into the system.
Is this a situation where the implementation of AI would help the airlines work through the repercussions? If you look at it in the pebble in the pond analogy, you cancel a flight from DC to Chicago. You say you're United, and I think Chicago is a United hub. You cancel a flight from BWI in Baltimore to O'Hare, but the repercussions of canceling that one flight, how replicative is that impact?
It's going to be very, very difficult. And what happens if the connection goes down abroad, on a foreign airline? They're going to end up routing some of their schedules differently also to accommodate the connecting passengers. So it's just not an easy puzzle. There's a lot of pieces, and you describe it very well. And until all the pieces are put back into place, the system just isn't going to work the way it should. Hopefully, we'll get the system up and running from where it is right now. It may not be too difficult a thing to resolve, but if it went on much longer, every day that it goes on makes it more difficult to put the patients back together again.
Well, you may have just answered the question I was just about to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. If, and I know this is not going to happen because it's going to take probably to the end of the week at least for the House to come back. But if they were to say tomorrow, switch back on, problem solved, let's go. How long do you think it would be before they were actually able to get the system back to its level of efficiency before they started cutting back on flights?
Well, the longer it goes on, the longer it's going to take to get back up and running. You've got people that are due proficiency checks, simulator checks, and things like this that haven't been done because the system's been shut down. You've got flight attendants that will need recurrent training. All this stuff has been postponed. So we've got to get people back on the schedule. We've got to get check airmen and check flight attendants in there to do the jobs. And then when we get the crews qualified, then we can work on getting the stations opened. I'm sure not all the stations will be open. There'll be some airports that are closed down for various airlines. And there again, that's part of the problem we're encountering right now. Hopefully it'll get resolved soon, because otherwise Thanksgiving would not be a pleasant place to fly this year, I don't think.
I'm sorry, say that again. The last part.
I said, I hope that they get things resolved rather quickly. Otherwise, traveling for Thanksgiving will not be a pleasant experience this year.
So with the reduced number of air traffic controllers that we've just talked about, how does that impact decision? Has the 10% reduction in air traffic brought the traffic within a level to work efficiently and effectively with the air traffic controllers on staff, or is that still a significant problem? Hopefully that question
Well, we're
makes
going to have to get some of the ones that are calling in sick or are not showing up for work because they're not getting paid. They're going to have to get back on the system for it to work properly. We don't know how long that'll take. The longer it goes on without a paycheck, many of them are just not possible to survive. And the same with the TSA agents, and effectively any laid off airline people, such as pilots and mechanics. They're all going to have to get back on the schedule. They're going to have to complete any necessary training and be able to accomplish the tasks at hand.
If you were in the cockpit today, what are some of the concerns that you would have, say, flying from New York to San Francisco? If you were flying a DC-10, what would be some of the concerns that you would have as a captain in the cockpit?
Well, if I were the captain and I had a flight plan file to San Francisco, I would expect that air traffic control and the FAA had everything set up, and I would be able to get good air traffic control service the entire length of the flight. So we would know right away before I was dispatched that we did have air traffic control service between those points. Now, if I was flying a corporate.
Wait a minute. Excuse me for interrupting you, but I'm glad you made that point, because from what I heard, and I'll need you to put this together for me, that some of the broader regional coverage has been reduced, and that now you're dealing with, for lack of a better way to say it, airport to airport. Does that make sense?
Well, no, the air traffic control centers that cover the entire country would deal with all the airplanes at their cruise altitudes. I hope will be completely intact. What you're talking about are the regional areas, small
Okay, right.
airports where there may not be controllers. They may be limited to operating the flights in what we call VFR, visual flight rules,
Uh-huh.
where you don't have instrument clearance and you have to proceed to find the runway and land on it, and that's a legal way to do it. And of course, many years ago, that's how things were done in many smaller airports.
Mm-hmm.
But now that isn't state of the art any longer. A lot of the people we're dealing with probably have never done it, but it's definitely a system that works, and it would be implemented only in dire circumstances, I would think.
Okay, so back to my. I'm sorry to have interrupted you. Back to my question. You're a captain. You're flying from New York to San Francisco. Do you have concern with radio contact? Do you have concern with getting prompt instructions from the tower? What kinds of concerns do you have?
Well, if they accepted my flight plan, I would assume as captain that they were able to dispatch me in accordance with regulations properly, and I wouldn't have any of those difficulties. I haven't heard any reports to the contrary, but it would be interesting to find out. My point was that if you were flying a corporate jet, and many businesses transport their executives with corporate jets, and it's a very common method of transportation, they wouldn't have a published schedule. And it would be more difficult for them to ensure that they had a slot to go to a particular airport than it would if they were a scheduled service. So it's no doubt affecting some of the corporate flight departments as well as the scheduled airlines.
In fact, that takes me when you started talking about corporate jets, that just made me think, and many people may not remember this, but the regional plane that crashed at DC National when it got hit by a helicopter, an Army helicopter, just about 2 months ago. So do you have those types of concerns in terms of departures and landings while crossing through busy airspace?
Well, it's always been a concern, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
DCA, Washington National, is one of the busiest airports in the country. I
Mm-hmm.
believe the north-south runway there has it with the distinction of being the busiest single runway in the country. And there's been a lot of military traffic, helicopters that fly very close to civilian airplanes. And it's surprising that this is the first occasion that we've had a collision, actually.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, is a dangerous situation, and the whole thing needs to be rectified. And they were in the process of doing that as the system shut down. So hopefully they'll reroute the military aircraft in a way where they can intermingle better with the civilian aircraft. That's a work in progress, I think.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned state of the art. I've read some concerns about American systems and whether or not the systems are in fact state of the art, that there needs to be, I don't know how much of this was merely political gibberish versus that there needs to be a whole revamp of the American system.
Well, it would probably be up to date for the 1960s.
Oh,
We're a
okay. Well,
long
good.
way from being up to speed of the system. And that was one of the things that they were working on. They were effectively trying to design what would amount to a new air traffic control system that would work much better and use, as you said, AI more
Mhm,
thoroughly to help separate traffic and to be able to predict where there would be conflicts and where not. So
mhm.
that's a work in progress that has been long overdue. So we'll hope that they'll come up with some real good solutions for that when we're back in the air again.
What about pilot training? There was a time when a number of our pilots were retired military. Now I think there are more, um, how can I say, commercially trained pilots, as in through aviation schools, as opposed to having been trained militarily. Um, is pilot training an issue along with antiquated systems?
Yes, indeed it is. To fly for an airline now, you need 1,500 hours of piloting experience. And when you're just learning to fly, that's a lot of hours.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how do you build them? And normally, the way someone would do it is to work as a flight instructor, and it would take a number of years to build that 1,500 hours up. So they've created a practically impossible situation for someone without a large amount of funds behind them to be able to become an airline pilot using the present system. So that's all going to have to be revisited, I think, when they come up with a much better system that will eliminate many of these loopholes and bottlenecks that are currently constraining us.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, with the reduction in flights, uh, how concerned are you about flying today? And once they get this whole issue settled, how much of your concerns will be alleviated?
Well, I am concerned. I hear things on the radio that I shouldn't hear. and
Such
the
as,
system isn't working the way it is.
okay.
Loss of control or communication or misunderstanding instructions. It's not a smoothly flowing system. It's like we're working with a lot of inexperienced people, and many of them will gain experience eventually. But in the meanwhile, it's takes a pretty good safety look to make sure we're in the right position.
Now, you had mentioned international flights, and I thought I read that the reduction that's being imposed was not impacting international flights, but you might have been referring to uh, passengers making domestic passengers making connections for international flights. Did I misunderstand you or that other story?
No, I think you're right. The international flights may be listed as going out full, but the passengers don't show up because they can't get there.
Okay.
So it's a real balancing act all the way around, and it varies by airport to airport, time of the day. You need the airplanes in position at the time of the day when they're going to fly. You don't need one arriving at 3 o'clock in the morning and with a departure at 3:30, because we just don't have the crews and the ability to do that sort of thing. So it's going to take the settling the strike. Plus, once we do that, we've got a lot more to complete emptying our plate of all the problems.
Are American pilots still the best trained pilots in the sky? I've talked to some who have said, with all of the automation in the cockpit now, that a lot of pilots merely know how to land and take off. That because of the automation, it has, but that American pilots are still the best trained pilots in the sky.
Well, let's talk about foreign airline pilots to start.
Okay.
And what they will do is they'll send a likely candidate to become a pilot, got good grades in school, perhaps some engineering background, and he'll attend flight school over here in the United States.
Oh, okay.
And they'll be quite qualified to enter the flight school. And they'll probably, in the minimum amount of hours, get their commercial pilot certificate plus an instrument rating, and then they go home. They're now assigned as a pilot on a flight. If he was an American, he'd need 1,500 hours. But because he's not flying for an American airline, that's out the window. So now he's suddenly the co-pilot on a 777, and he's only got a few hundred hours and very little time in the 777. So it becomes almost a one-man band. And this, to me, doesn't indicate a well-trained pilot. We want an experienced pilot who's seen a lot of things, and they're just not out there anymore. There aren't that many military pilots coming available for the airlines because they get a really good deal in the military. And there's less and less demand for the pilots with military qualifications to fill civilian roles.
Why is that?
We don't have many open seats for fighter pilots. So we would primarily get some with transport experience. And the military pays well, and they're just not discharging people anymore. Most people look at this mess that's going on now, and they're very glad they're in the military, probably.
So final question, because I just want to be sure I understand the thought process. So if I'm an F-16 pilot and I've decided that I'm tired of relocating, I'm just tired of the military life, and I want to get out of the military, you're saying the chances or probability of me going to American or me going to United, a domestic commercial company, that there's not that as much of that demand anymore?
Well, there's a great demand for you because you're an experienced guy, but
Okay.
there's not many people that have your experience that
Oh,
they can
I get it.
hire.
Okay. I get it. All right. Well, Captain Keith Mackey, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate that analysis. Hopefully they'll be able to get this thing resolved very soon, or else you and I are going to have to sit down and have another conversation.
Well, we'll see what happens. It'll probably be an opportune time to do that. I think that they'll have it worked out here in a few weeks, hopefully. We'll
Thank you.
see the way it goes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe, and thank you for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, folks. A couple other things going on that I think we need to hit fairly quickly, and one is the House is scheduled now to return to Washington once the Senate passes the shutdown deal. Without an agreement to speed up the process, it could take several days for this proposed procedural measure to clear the Senate. It is a bipartisan compromise. It's combining 3 full-year funding measures for specific parts of the government into one package, along with a stopgap funding bill for the rest through January 30th. But there's some other issues here that I think are muddying the waters here, and one of them is the fact that in this Senate agreement, they're not dealing with the healthcare subsidies. It will reverse more than 4,000 federal layoffs that the Trump administration attempted to implement earlier in the shutdown, but it's not extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year, which is going to increase healthcare costs for millions of Americans. And that, to me, has me scratching my head, wondering what's the deal? What is the deal? These Democrats in the Senate that agreed to this, I can't remember, I'm trying to find who it was that I heard say this. They said, well, this is the best deal that we're going to get on the table. Well, according to who? That's one of the questions that I have. And what do you call it when you go into negotiation and you don't get the primary reason you're going into negotiation? Here's an analogy. Let's say I love steak. Steak. I love steak. I'll do anything to eat a steak. And so you tell me that you're going to take me to the best steakhouse in the country. You say, next week, Wilmer, I'm taking you to the best steakhouse in the country. And you come and get me. In fact, you bring me on your private jet. You're able to navigate all of these airport closures and all this stuff. You come and get me on your private jet. You fly me to the best steakhouse in the country. And, you get me the best bourbon possible. I get a steak potato. I get green beans. I get a wonderful salad. The tiramisu is off the chart. Where's my steak? Oh, Wilmer. No steak for you. How was your meal? Well, I like green beans with almonds. The steak potato from Idaho was the best potato I've ever had. It was Mr. Potato Head's son. It was such a good potato. Where's my steak? Oh, no steak. How was your meal? Well, it was lousy. I didn't get a steak. I don't understand the Democrats that agreed to this deal. It doesn't make any sense. What was the point of all of this? If you went through this entire process, Jeanne Shaheen, what was the process? Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, Angus King of Maine. What was the point? You've gone through all of this. And no, this was not compromise. This was capitulation. There's a huge difference between compromise and capitulation. What they got was the language about the healthcare subsidies isn't even written in to the language that's going to go from the Senate to the House. That's not compromise. That's capitulation. You got hoodwinked. You got bamboozled. You got led astray. You folded your tent. And the question is, why? The question, Jeanne Shaheen, why? Well, we weren't going to get a better deal. You obviously weren't paying attention to the news, Jeanne Shaheen. You obviously weren't reading the tea leaves in the bottom of your teacup, Jeanne Shaheen. When Donald Trump called Thune and said, do away with the filibuster rule, that was showing you a crack in the armor. That was showing you that Donald Trump was getting desperate. And when Thune told Trump no, that was, first of all, that's a word that Donald Trump hasn't heard from Congress very often. No, Mr. President, bad idea. Not gonna do it. He's not used to hearing that. When he called Muppet Mike in the House and said, Muppet Mike, are you a man or a Muppet? A Muppet or a man? Actually, Muppet Mike said, no, Mr. President, bad idea. Donald Trump wasn't used to hearing that from Muppet Mike. Jeanne Shaheen, that was a message that what you needed to do was turn up the heat. What you needed to do was dig in. I'm a left-handed batter. My back left foot. I needed to dig in and let them know we're united here. You don't know that wasn't the deal. That was you, Jeanne. You capitulated. You didn't compromise because you didn't really get anything. That was called compromise. Whoever says that obviously knows zero about contract negotiation. And before you can start typing furiously, I was a contracts negotiator in a top 5 Fortune 5 company for almost 30 years. I do understand contract negotiation for those that might want to question it. Obviously, Jeanne Shaheen should have called me because that, folks, wow. But now we're going to see. Now we're about to find out whether Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, has control of the Democrats in the House? Does he have control of his conference? How united will the Democrats be in anticipation of this procedural vote that passed, I think, yesterday? That procedural vote turning into a legislative vote, and that bill being sent to the House for them to vote on. We're about to find out, because obviously Chuck Schumer doesn't have control of the conference in the Senate. If he had, he would have taken Jeanne Shaheen outside and let her know, hey, we ain't doing this. This is not the time to fold, Jeanne. So one of the questions has to be, Chuck Schumer, how did you lose control of your conference in the Senate? And again, we're about to find out how much control Hakeem Jeffries has over the Democrat conference in the House. Here's another issue. I'm going to read this. So, Zayun, if you know about contract negotiations, you should know that you don't always get what you want. That is called compromise. I understand that, Zhao Yun. They didn't get anything. That's the point you're missing. They got nothing based upon what they went in to get. They got nothing. That's not compromise, Zhao Yun. That's called capitulation. Look it up, because you obviously don't know the difference between compromise and capitulation. Let me know if you need me to spell it for you, since you don't seem to have a grasp of it. Finally, there's a visit today in the White House. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, that's the name he goes by now, the rebel leader who became Syria's president after working on behalf of the United States to oust Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, had a sit-down meeting today in the White House with Donald Trump. It's the first by a Syrian leader, I think, in the history of Syria. And this is an unthinkable moment for this country. For those of you who don't remember, I've read a Wall Street Journal story from October of 2024 entitled "How a Syrian Rebel Went from an American Jail to Seizing Aleppo." Once affiliated with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, Jolani professes religious tolerance. Many have doubts. This is from October of 24. Abu Muhammad al-Jilani boarded a bus in Damascus in March of 2003, heading across the desert to Baghdad with fellow volunteers, eager to repel the looming American invasion of Iraq. When he returned home in 2011 after a 5-year stint in an American-run prison camp, it was as the emissary of Islamic State founder Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Jolani arrived in Syria with bags full of cash and a mission to take the extremist movement global. Later in October, then 42-year-old Jolani triumphantly entered Aleppo. Now, the Wall Street Journal just says triumphantly entered Aleppo. Doesn't explain to you that he was actually operating at the behest of the United States. He was the leading commander of the, they say, Turkish-backed rebel force dominated by his group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. But that Syrian money came through the United States. Now, this man had a $10 million bounty on his head that had been set by the CIA. The CIA removes the bounty. He changes his name. And now he's sitting today in the White House with Donald Trump. Folks, that's horrible. That's deplorable. And one reason why? Because he's still chopping heads in Syria. His promise for religious moderation is a lie. I think Professor Dan Kovalik has been on this show, who's been to Syria a number of times and has spoken to that reality. Folks, that's what this has become. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Whether it's backing genocide in Gaza or backing this guy in Syria, there's just now absolutely no moral compass guiding our policy. And not that there ever really was, but there was a time when there was the facade of a moral imperative. There was a time when other countries actually did look to us for a semblance of morality. But now we have zero. We got nothing. We actually have become, in many regards, the very thing that we claimed to be opposing. I remember saying after September 11th, when the so-called war on terror was created, when you had Dick Cheney, who was, oh shoot, let me see if I can quickly, I always forget this guy's name. The Attorney General was, oh shoot, I forgot that, dang it, I forgot this guy's name. Oh, John Ashcroft. John Ashcroft. Do you remember when John Ashcroft, then the Attorney General, was proposing to use U.S. postal employees, mail carriers, as spies on the routes that they were managing mail? You remember that? As you look at the, as Dick Cheney called them, enhanced interrogation techniques, the torture that he authorized, that the CIA implemented, the waterboarding, the sleep deprivation, the shock, all of the things that have been documented that were horrifically implemented at the hands of the United States. When you look at, in fact, I want to say it was the Japanese that we learned waterboarding I think, from the Japanese in World War II. I think. So as we looked at the stripping away of our civil rights and the stripping away of our civil liberties in reaction to the strikes on September 11th, I was making the point that our society, that our culture, that our democracy was devolving at such a rate that we were quickly becoming the very people that we claimed to be fighting against. And that once you interjected the power of the military industrial complex, because what September 11th basically did was put the military industrial complex on steroids, that for all intents and purposes, the terrorists won. Because we then are the morality upon which our country was supposed to be based upon was stripped away by Barack Obama's Tuesday kill list. The morality that our country was supposed to be based on was done away with the murder of Saddam Hussein, with the brutality that the United States imposed upon Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Our backing of genocide in Gaza, and not just post October 7th. Not just that, because contrary to the dominant narrative, that struggle in Palestine has been going on for over 60 years. What transpired on the 7th of October was in response to the colonial settler project known as Israel for 60 years. So, for all intents and purposes, you can call it Stockholm syndrome. I don't know what you want to call it. But we have devolved into the very thing that we claimed to be fighting against. I thought ISIS was our enemy. Excuse me for being naive. Excuse me for paying attention. Excuse me for listening to Joe Biden. Excuse me for listening to Donald Trump. Excuse me for listening to Barack Obama. But they all told me that ISIS was our enemy. They told me ISIS was a terrorist group. They told me that ISIS was just a group of rampant, rabid terrorist thugs that just traversed the world cutting off people's heads. So much so that we had a $10 million bounty on the head of the guy that right now is sitting in the Oval Office next to Donald Trump. Where's the outrage? Democrats, can't you chew gum and walk at the same time? Can't you do more than one thing in the course of a day, in the course of a week? Or are you so myopic that you lose track of the rest of the world as it continues to spin in turn? The guy that had a $10 million bounty on his head for being ISIS, for killing American soldiers is now, since he trimmed his beard, he cut his hair, he changed his name, and he got a better suit than Zelensky has. Now he gets to sit in the Oval Office next to the president. And one of the ironies here, if you think back, oh yeah, they hate us for our freedoms. Aziz, they hate us for our freedoms we never had. You know, one of the ironies here, if you go back to, where am I time-wise? Okay, I got a couple minutes. Go back to the meeting between Donald Trump and President Putin in Alaska. And some of the commentators were critiquing that meeting. And, oh, okay, Aziz, I'm Syrian and Al-Jilani is not and never will be my president. If you would please, Aziz, explain why, if you can, succinctly explain why. Well, Aziz, am I anywhere close to being right? First, help me out with that one. Am I anywhere close to being right in my analysis, since you're Syrian? Am I anywhere close to being right in this? Oh, okay. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. So if you think back to when Trump met President Putin in Russia, one of the things that was said by a number of analysts is Donald Trump meeting with Putin in Alaska. Oh, all he's doing is giving Putin more legitimacy. All he's doing is raising the stature of Putin on the world stage. As though, first of all, Putin needs Donald Trump to legitimize him. Oh, thank you, Aziz, I'm correct. Okay. As though Putin needs, because Aziz, if I wasn't correct, please correct me. Anyway, and as though President Putin needs Donald Trump to be legitimate. I mean, when you look at BRICS, they represent the BRICS organization of which Russia is a part and a founding member. I think they represent over 3/4. I might be a little over on my number, but they represent almost 3/4 of the world's population. If you add up the population of the countries that are in BRICS, I think if it's not 3/4, it's damn near close. I don't think a founding member of an organization that represents almost 3/4 of the world's population needs Donald Trump to make him or her legitimate. I don't think the founding member of an organization that represents almost 3/4 of the world's population needs Donald Trump to elevate their perspective or their stature on the world stage. I think they already got it. I don't think a country that is kicking ass and taking names in Ukraine needs Donald Trump to build their stature and status. Al-Jilani does. And Donald Trump is giving it to him. And for what? For what? For what? So it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Every Democrat should be standing in the House and in the Senate, should have been standing on the steps of their respective buildings, saying that that man is not welcome in this country. He's a war criminal. If he was a terrorist when the CIA put a $10 million bounty on his head, why isn't he a terrorist now? Now, some might ask, well, Wilmer, there was a, what was it? $10 million bounty on the head of Nicolas Maduro. Well, we can unpack that, and I can prove to you without question that that was sheerly political. Because how many heads has how many heads has Nicolas Maduro been responsible for chopping off? As I won't even try to butcher your name, as Dr. Ware said, I'm the greatest counterinsurgency force in the history of politics in America. Well, you are very kind. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. How many, I mean, I can provide you a litany, and Zhao that means a hell of a lot. I can provide you a litany of evidence to show you that al-Jilani was, and to this day, is a terrorist. I can show you a litany of evidence to show you that President Nicolas Maduro is the democratically elected president of Venezuela. So I'm not saying just because he had a $10 million bounty on his head, he's a terrorist. No, I'm saying he was a terrorist and they put a $10 million bounty on his head. And now he sits in the swamp with the swamp monsters. I guess that's a rightful place for him to be. But where's the outrage? Where's the moral outrage? With that, I want to thank you all for joining me today. I want to thank Captain Mackey for joining us today. Thank you all for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Sorry, I forgot who my guest is going to be. You want to send me a message and tell me? Because I forgot. Anyway, you'll dig it. Trust me. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Follow on social media. All the links are below in the show description. Remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, have a truly blessed remainder of your day. And until we see you tomorrow, peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.